why Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail, or any patient communication is bad for your practice and a huge HIPAA risk. My name is Fernando Sosa, and I am the owner of HaonTech.com. We're an IT consulting company. We provide computer maintenance and support for private practices in New Jersey and Greater New York. I'm a certified HIPAA security professional, Microsoft certified technology specialist, Microsoft partner, software developer. I basically help small businesses with their IT resources. So HaonTech.com is the name of the company, and Worry Free MD is the name of the webinar series that we set out to help MGMA members and practice managers and providers. So let's get started. This is the agenda for today. Now, this is the second of the webinar in the series. I hope you were in attendance on the first one. So today we're going to tackle the free email services. And so basically, I'm going to start with talking about why is it bad for business? Aside from the medical issues, the HIPAA, aside from that, why are these free email services bad for business? And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then we're going to get into the HIPAA. Why is the HIPAA risk? And I'm going to highlight a couple of reasons for this. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to get into HIPAA compliant email and the best practices. And then we're going to end with a Q&A. So if you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please click on Ask a Question on the upper right, on the upper left, and I'll be answering these questions at the end of the webinar. So while you see some of the slides, you might have a question, just pop it in there as a question, and I'll get to them at the end. And so this is a brief 30-minute webinar. It's high level. It's not a sales presentation, and it's not a technical presentation. So I'm not going to get into technical details too deep. And so hopefully I'll answer some of your questions, and maybe I'll raise some questions that you may not have. Okay, so let's get going. Now, why is it bad for business? Why is Yahoo, Gmail, Outlook, or Hotmail, why is it bad for business? Well, the free email services, the first thing that I have here is in terms of portraying your professional image. It's not good for a professional image, for your branding, the marketing. This is again, this is not medical related. This is in terms of business. In terms of having a free email service, the branding, what you portray for your business, it kind of blurs the line between personal and business. And whenever you see a free email, either Juno, Yahoo, etc., or AOL, the first thing that a person will identify is with a personal email account. So when you're using it for business purposes, basically it's portraying that, and again, this is subjective, so it may not be something that you may believe, but in general, the consensus is pretty much the same, that if a business is using a personal email address or personal email account for business, there's something to be skeptical of, at least at first glance. So in terms of branding yourself, marketing yourself, there's many business points about that are not positive. It does not help your business when you're having a personal email account. So just in terms of professional image and versus an amateur image and the branding of the business, it's not good. So another point here that we have is lack of security, audit, and controls. When you're using one of these email services, you really have no control over it. It's really whatever the company decides to do with their privacy policies, with their security, with their settings. You really have no control over that. So in terms of your business, how do you manage your email if you have no control over it? You can't audit. You can't really determine what's spent in the long term. You can't control who has access to email unless you may be using just one email account for your whole practice, but that's still a problem in terms of security and the different practices that I'm going to show you a couple of slides of examples of what I'm talking about in terms of lack of security and audit and control. So you really don't have that, and you can't really say tell Google or Yahoo, I want to put something in place with this email because it's free, and they don't provide that type of support, which brings me to the third point here, is technical support. Good luck with that. Technical support is almost non-existent with the free email services, and you may have noticed this. If you have a technical issue with the email, they typically provide some type of forum where you can post questions, and maybe the community answers it, hopefully. So it's not really a person from the company, from Google, that responds to it. Maybe they do respond, but there's no service level agreement where they have to respond by a certain amount of time, or it's really a back and forth. So there's no technical support, at least not a business class technical support that you would expect to run a business. So if you're putting your business on the line and you're sending out emails and you have a problem or your email is down or something related with the email, you really are not going to have the technical support that a business with these types of services. The other point here that I have is, when an employee leaves, if you're using one of these free email services and an employee leaves, you have a turnaround, the email account pretty much goes with the person. So if you have different employees using free email accounts, or even the providers, if the providers themselves use their free email accounts, the provider leaves the practice, basically everything related to the business, to the practice goes with that provider and to the email. And that may or may not be okay. And it's definitely not okay when it's a non-provider. Again, you might have just one email account for your business, but still, it's still a problem when somebody leaves and has access to this account. And especially if you have your contacts in the address book of these free email services, that also is open to the person, and if the person leaves and still has access, or it's the same password and using multiple accounts and that sort of thing. It brings you back to point number 2, which is lack of security and control. So the fifth point here that I have is hackers, they love these free email services. They really love it because of the fact that these free email services are so anonymous. I mean, anybody can open multiple email accounts, put fake names, and use it for personal, business, whatever. These hackers are constantly trying to hack these free email accounts. Typically, there's lack of security. They're easy to break into because people just put simple passwords and that sort of thing. So hackers are always on top of these free email services and trying to hack them. And when they hack into them, they get into the contacts and spam. So that's one of the biggest reasons why these free email services are bad for business. Also, when these emails go out, usually they get blocked by spam filters. Typically, they're just flagged as spam, probably from the very beginning when you send an email the first time to a patient or a customer. So these are the biggest, I put it on high level. Why it's bad for business? Whether it's convincing or not, you may be used to it, but it is the truth. Being in business, it's just very easy to have your own email account that you don't need to use one of these free services. You may also, in terms of branding, it's a great marketing opportunity for you to market your practice when you have a name attached to your email. When instead of saying ABC at Yahoo, you have ABC at yournamespractice.com. So that makes a big impact, or a bigger impact than having a free email service. And I'm going to get into a little bit into that just because you have a name on the email doesn't mean that behind the scenes you're not using one of these services. But that's just one level better when you have your own name attached to the domain. Now, why is it a HIPAA risk? Well, when you're sending an email, the email is typically unsecured. And one of the things that I covered in my previous webinar is that by definition, data that is unsecured and it falls into the wrong hands, that's considered a breach. So when you're sending an email, it's unsecured. It's really like sending a postcard. Okay? when you're sending a postcard, literally, anybody who touches the card can look at the card and see the message and read the message. And so between you putting it in the mailbox, the carrier taking it and going to the post office and sorting it and then delivering it to the recipient's office building or mailbox, and then the assistant getting it from the mailbox and putting it in the desk. You know, anybody that touches the postcard can look at the message, right? Sending email with these free services is pretty much the same, and so the message is unencrypted, so there's no privacy there. Okay. Now, sending a message that is encrypted is what will solve that problem. And encryption, again, is something that I talked about in my previous webinar, is the answer to securing your PHI, your data. So when you encrypt an email, it's very similar of putting your letter in a sealed envelope and sending it via certified mail. So only the recipient can get it, and only the recipient can read it. That's the idea behind encryption when you're sending an email that's encrypted. So that is what you need to do in order to achieve HIPAA compliance with your email. And you're not going to attain that with these free email services. So this is the key takeaway here, at least why it's a big HIPAA risk. This basically boils down to your messages being sent that are not encrypted. They might be encrypted in transit. There's a concept between encryption in transit and encryption in motion. I covered that in my previous webinar. And you're not going to get the full end-to-end encryption with these free services. So this is one of the main takeaways of why it's a big HIPAA risk. Now, whether you think you're not sending PHI or you are sending PHI, there's a gray area there where you may not know for sure 100% that you are sending PHI, and you can have that risk. It's a risk. This slide here of the Omnibus rule expanded the definition of who is a HIPAA business associate to cloud providers. So this is important here, and this is the transition here. Cloud providers are any of the vendors that you may use for either backup, email, or even your EMR solution if it's online. Those are now considered business associates, and they have to comply with HIPAA. So here's a quote from the HIPAA that says, basically, document storage companies maintaining PHI on behalf of covered entities are considered business associates, regardless of whether they actually view the information or not. So if you have an email provider and or a backup provider, they store documents, right? They have access to your information. They are considered business associates. So what this means is that they have to sign what's called a business associate agreement. Any cloud provider that you're using, in order to be in with HIPAA, you need to have a BAA, okay, a business associate agreement with your cloud provider. The problem here is that the free services, they don't sign a BAA to cover entities. So here's the risk right now. According to HIPAA, cloud providers need to have BAAs, right? And the free services will not sign these BAAs with you. Okay, so right there, another big takeaway for you, the answer why it's a HIPAA risk is because you're putting this in the cloud and you don't have an agreement or contract with the cloud provider that they're HIPAA compliant in terms of your, they might say it, but if you don't have a BAA, you don't have a business associate agreement, then that's a problem. Okay? Just a reminder, if you have questions during the course of the webinar, please type your questions on the upper left. You're going to see Ask a Question button. You can go ahead and click on that and type your question there, and then at the end of the webinar, I'm going to go through the question and try to answer it. Okay? So, as I was saying, the cloud provider are required to sign a BAA. Okay? So, here's just an example. I'm just picking on Google right now, but this is a quote from a motion, Google web report for an issue here. I'm just going to read you the motion. It says, just as a sender of this is somebody from Google. Just as a sender of the letter to a business colleague cannot be surprised that a recipient assistant opens the letter. People who use web-based email today cannot be surprised that their emails are processed by the recipient's email provider in the course of the delivery. So the motion reads in part, indeed, a person has no legitimate expectation of privacy in information he voluntarily turns over to third parties. So basically, Google is saying you shouldn't expect privacy if you're putting your email, if they're handling your email. You shouldn't expect it. Okay, so that's the mentality behind it. And you may not have thought about this, you're just sending emails and you know, that's it. But you have to understand how the business runs on their end. So there happens on another slide here where Google confirms basically that it fired an engineer for breaking internal privacy rules, and basically the engineer read the emails on the Google servers, and he had a relationship with a teenager, and basically he was bragging that he could, you know, he read his emails and he had this relationship with this teenager, and he was fired. So this just brings to light that the people that work at Google and any of these other companies, they can have access to your email and read it. Remember what I said, the example of a postcard, right? If the email is not encrypted, then it's like a postcard where anybody who has access to the actual message can read it. So here's an example of a Google engineer that inappropriately accessed, he violated their internal policies, but still, the policies is a policy, but technically the email was there and he could see it, could read it. And he got fired, okay? So here's just an example. This was a while ago, and this was not the first time, okay? There's a slide. This is the second time, again, this was a while ago, but it was admitted that another engineer was fired for the same reason, okay? So this is something that could happen to you if you're using one of these free email services, right? The data in the back end, it's open, it's not private, okay? So as a small business, okay, small practices are being noticed, are getting noticed by HHS. Okay. Now here's an example of a small practice, a Phoenix cardiac surgery, a small practice of 5 physicians got fined for $100,000 by OCR for failing to protect patient information. 5 physicians. Okay. So let's get into this. What did they do wrong? Well, this practice was using a free email service. They used their calendar, like Google Calendar, Yahoo Calendar, because Calendar. So they were posting patient information, appointments, and this service. I highlighted here in red, the red arrow. HHS began investigating Phoenix after receiving a complaint that Phoenix had intermittently disclosed EPHI by posting clinical and surgical appointments for its patients on an internet-based, publicly accessible calendar. So right there, this practice, did something that was wrong, right? HHS received a complaint. Now, I just want to highlight that. Anybody can complain to HHS. So, and then the HHS opens an investigation. So, if you're using these free email services and you're communicating with your patients for whatever, it might not even have patient information, but according to you or the patient. But if they complain, just the fact that you're using these free email services, and they complain to HHS, and they say maybe they did, maybe they didn't send PHI, or they think they did. Even if they think they did, they open the investigation. HHS follows through. So that's a complaint from a patient, right? So a patient, obviously, they know you're using a free email service because they're getting the email from you, right? So this is an example of what happens to a small practice and a big fine for a small practice. So again, this is just an example that small businesses are being affected, are being watched. Now, bad habits are hard to break. Maybe a big fine, can be an eye opener. It's some physicians they don't want to use the hospital email system or the practice network. It's more comfortable for them to use the personal Gmail, Yahoo or whatever. It's kind of normal when you start a business, just stick with what you know. It's very easy to just do it, right? But there's implication now later on as your business matures. You really have to think about this. And now it's a requirement with HIPAA. So any patient-related communication, either insurance, appointments, refill, anything, if it's sent via these non-secure free services, it's a problem. So you really have to pay attention to this and switch over to a secure email system. Now, let me see how we are in time. Again, if you have questions, please type them in. And I see some questions here. I'm going to take a look at them. Okay, so free services, they're not really free. I mean, nothing is really free. Free services make money from your data. Okay, that means you're giving it's an exchange of privacy. That's why they're free. And with the medical industry, that's a problem, right? So Google scans all your mail and whatever's in it. So if there's PHI, they're scanning that. And they provide advertisements and other information to you if you have a free account. And this data can be stored anywhere in any format. So that's what free is. Okay, for them, that's worth a lot of money. So HIPAA compliant email best practices, couple of things. To be HIPAA compliant, I mean, this is beyond the scope of this webinar, but you just have HIPAA training, and not just once, but on a constant basis. HIPAA training for your staff in terms of key email communication and educational resources for your staff and also your patients, how you communicate and what to do, what you shouldn't do. Also, ongoing training, documentation. If a patient does consent to get email with PHI, they actually can do that, but you have to document that. EMRs, if they're in the cloud, they typically have a patient portal, and that's typically secure. If it's in the cloud or EMR, use that instead, and that typically has the PHI in the cloud, and then it sends you a message that doesn't have the PHI, and it directs you to the portal. Don't use free email services because sooner or later you run the risk that you will send either scattered amounts of PHI, maybe not the complete PHI, or it's broken down into pieces. It's just a risk that you want to try to avoid. And you definitely want to have a signed BAA with your email provider. Okay? So let's see. I see some questions coming in. Okay. So here I'm going to end with some examples of data breaches. I have this on my previous webinar. This is from the HHS website. I highlighted the one in yellow again to highlight that this is a nonprofit, a small nonprofit hospice in North Idaho who had a breach and HIPAA violation of $50,000. And it involved less than 500 patients. Again, small practice and a hefty fine. So small practices are being noticed, and you have to pay attention to this. And typically, the small practices have the same scenario going on. The IT provider, they don't have an IT provider. The IT provider doesn't know HIPAA. So it's good to ask these questions to your IT provider, and hopefully, they'll be certified HIPAA security professionals. But if not, at least you have the information and the right questions to ask. Okay, so now I'm going to open it up with the Q&A. I have some questions I'm going to go over. And again, if you have some other questions, you can always contact me. There's my contact information. You can visit the website. There's other webinars in the series that you can register to. And you're also going to receive a survey link via email. Please fill that out. Let me know. Give me some feedback on the webinar, and I can help improve for the future ones. So you're going to get that via email. So let me see some of the questions. I have one question here. Says, what if we have a domain but we still use Gmail? Okay, this was something that I mentioned before. You can still have an email address that has your domain or your company name, like Dr. So-and-so at mypractice.com, with the name of your practice. But that just says that the email, you have a domain, like a website. Like if you have a website and your website has a specific name, that's yours, you can use the email and attach the domain of the website. And that's better but that doesn't guarantee that the email is not one of those free services. You can still use the free services and still have the same problem. So yes, having a domain is good for branding and a lot of it's good business sense, but you still have an issue if you're still using the free services in the back. Another question I have here: what email service should I use? Okay, what should I use then if you're using? Well, that's a conversation you want to have with your IT provider, but you want to use something that definitely uses encryption, and you definitely want to have something that has end-to-end encryption. Okay? Encryption when you're sending it, encryption when it's in transit, and encryption when they're reading it on the other end. Because again, when you're sending an email from Gmail or Yahoo, even if you happen to have it encrypted on your end, on the receiver side, on the patient side, that message also has to be encrypted. So your secure email solution has to be encrypted from end to end. That's to achieve the HIPAA compliance. But that's a deeper technical conversation that you need to have with your provider. So another one here: what if we're using an email service from the internet provider like Verizon? Is that okay? Good question. If you have your Verizon Optimum, they usually also give you a free email account. Okay, it's still the same. You're still running the same problem. It's free, and if they have a BAA, if you get them to sign a BAA, then that gives you the assurance, the provision that it is HIPAA compliant if they're saying so. But typically that's not the case. Okay, it's still one of those free services. You run into the same problems in terms of control, security, audit, the same problem. You don't use PHI. Is that okay? Well, if you don't use PHI, you don't use PHI. But if you have the email for your business, it's very likely that you will at one point send something that's PHI, and that something is enough to cause a breach. The incident is in the thousands just for a single incident. So you want to avoid this threat. Basically, that's the bottom line. Okay, that's all the question that I have here. Okay, I think that's it. If anybody has any other questions, checking the queue. No? I'll wait for a few seconds. Okay, we're up on the top of the hour. We're pretty good. Well, thank you very much, everybody. And my name is Fernando Sosa again. I hope to see you in the next webinar in the Worry Free MD webinar series. Thank you.